The truth they never wanted you to hear. You're not ready for this, because what I'm about to tell you shatters the illusion the world's been fed. The headlines lied. The whispers twisted everything. But once you piece the puzzle together, you'll realize this was never about harassment. Never about justice, it was about control, power, and the ruthless war behind the glossy Hollywood smiles. The truth is, Blake Lively's battle wasn't fought in courtrooms for fairness. It was waged in boardrooms for dominance. The audio that dropped wasn't in expos. It was a spark igniting the firestorm that revealed just how deep this manipulation ran. Clark Kent, not the superhero, but a random internet hero, went straight to the clerk's office, pulled the tape and exposed the very evidence that Blake used in her lawsuit. In that 47-1 motion, she paints this audio as proof that she was the target of a massive plot to destroy her reputation. But when you really listen, when you pull apart the layers of legal jargon and emotional baiting, the truth hits like a punch. This was never about retaliation or abuse. It was about PR control. She claimed Steve Sarowitz threatened her family with $100 million and 2 dead bodies, turning what was clearly a sarcastic remark into a cinematic threat. But if you listen to the tape, he laughs. He isn't angry. He isn't plotting. He's mocking the absurdity of it all. Yet Blake twists it, bending every syllable into the illusion of a man with malice. Why? Because that lie builds her case. Because that lie fuels sympathy. Because that lie gives her control. And control, not truth, is the foundation of this entire saga. When Clark uploaded the file, the timestamp told us everything. August 29th. The same date that lined up perfectly with the internal chaos of marketing disputes. Not legal retaliation. There were no harassment claims at that time. No reports, no HR filings, just a full-blown war over how to sell a movie. This wasn't about someone's safety. It was about someone's ego. It was about the image, the campaign, and the empire that Blake and Ryan were trying to shape. 2 megastars caught in a storm of their own creation, using emotional narratives to mask business fallout. When you zoom out, it's almost Shakespearean, not a tragedy of innocence, but of power-hungry perfectionists trying to rewrite failure as victimhood. Because on August 12th, weeks before that audio, the real spark lit the fuse. That's when Blake and Ryan demanded that Wayfair Studios issue a statement, not about harassment, not about justice, but about damage control. They wanted the studio to take full accountability for a troubled production. As if a generic apology could rewrite public perception. Their draft was dripping with guilt-coded PR language. We take full responsibility. We are learning. We are growing. But here's the kicker. It never said why. It never mentioned misconduct. It never admitted to anything specific. It was smoke and mirrors, the perfect illusion of transparency. What they wanted was to dump every ounce of blame for the film's backlash onto the studio while washing their own hands clean. And when the studio refused, that's when the gloves came off. Threats, legal letters, power plays. Blake and Ryan told them outright, put out the statement or the storm begins. The irony. The same people screaming about being silenced were the ones trying to control the narrative. The entire thing reeked of manipulation, a desperate attempt to shift accountability away from poor marketing choices and fractured relationships. Blake didn't like the criticism. Ryan didn't like the headlines. And when the world started questioning their every move, from her awkward press interviews to the uncomfortable separation from co-star Justin Baldoni, they turned to the oldest PR trick in the book. Make yourself the victim. They wanted the world to believe this chaos came from harassment, not hubris. But the more you dig, the clearer it becomes. The so-called hostile environment was a creative feud disguised as a moral crusade. Steve Sarowitz wasn't threatening her safety. He was defending his studio. His statement about protecting it like Israel protects itself against Hamas wasn't a call for violence. It was business passion taken out of context and weaponized against him. Blake needed that narrative because, without it, her entire legal claim collapses. And that's the raw truth. The headlines won't print, Because it's not convenient. It's not emotional. It's not clickbait. It's just cold, unpolished reality. Polished reality. This was never about justice. It was about domination. Let's call it what it is. A war for control disguised as a cry for justice. Blake and Ryan weren't fighting for fairness. They were fighting for their image, for their empire, for the illusion of untouchable stardom. Every sealed record, every redacted sentence, every sensitive detail was strategic, not protective. They wanted to keep the timeline buried because the truth destroys their story. The recording wasn't evidence of abuse, it was evidence of a marketing meltdown. Wayfair's filings exposed the reality. The call happened at the end of August. Weeks after Blake's PR crisis began, and everything pointed back to one motive. Control of narrative. Even the court saw through it. The judge literally noted that Blake herself caused the publicity she later claimed violated her privacy. Think about that. She was the one feeding the headlines, then crying foul when they turned against her. It's the ultimate Hollywood double play. Weaponize the media, then hide behind legal jargon when it backfires. The confidential witness in her declaration didn't even discuss harassment, trauma, or HR complaints. She praised the team. She praised the project. But the script was already written, and it wasn't truth, it was propaganda. The audio wasn't leaked for justice, it was leaked to manipulate emotion. Blake's team wanted to paint a man's frustration as aggression, a business disagreement as abuse. They wanted you angry. They wanted you emotional. Because emotions cloud logic. And when logic enters the room, their entire narrative falls apart. Wayfair never even addressed the audio in court filings. Not because they were scared, but because it was irrelevant. It had nothing to do with harassment and everything to do with marketing chaos. Yet Blake's side clung to it like gospel, knowing that perception is more powerful than proof. The irony is almost poetic. A woman who built a brand on empowerment. Using emotional misdirection to control an empire she didn't own. This wasn't a courtroom drama, it was a corporate coup. Every exclusive report was another piece of PR warfare. Ryan, with his company running marketing, was right in the middle, the same husband who wasn't even part of the supposed protected activity was suddenly authoring legal statements, negotiating with studios, and leveraging media influence. If this was truly about harassment, why was Ryan writing the apology draft? Because it was never about harassment. It was about optics. Their entire fight with Wayfair stemmed from one thing. They wanted to control the movie's public image, and when they lost that power, they launched a smear campaign. From demanding public apologies to threatening lawsuits, they turned a PR crisis into a moral war. The saddest part, they convinced millions that this was about justice. They made good people believe a marketing feud was a crusade against discrimination. And every sealed file, every emotional post, every hidden detail was meant to blur the lines between truth and theater. They dragged the court into a show, the media into a maze, and the public into a circus. But now that the audio's out, the curtain's falling. The mask is slipping. What we're left with isn't a story of bravery, it's a story of ego. It's the anatomy of manipulation built on half-truths and emotional engineering. The lawsuits, the sealed exhibits, the twisted context, all of it was crafted to make you feel, not think. But now that you see through it, you realize what this really was. A PR war dressed as a legal case. It was about power, ownership, and who gets to write history. Blake and Ryan played their parts perfectly. Composed, relatable, but behind the scenes, they were wielding influence like a weapon. And Wayfair. They stayed silent because sometimes silence screams louder than spin. The verdict doesn't matter anymore. The truth already won. Because the moment the real story came out, every illusion shattered. And now when you watch the interviews, the smiles, the "we're learning and growing" lines, you'll know. You'll see through it all. This was never about justice. It was about domination. And that's the truth they never wanted you to hear. Never wanted you to hear. When power turns into paranoia, here's the part they never wanted exposed, because this is where the facade begins to crumble. When power turns into paranoia, the truth becomes a weapon. And every word, every headline, every whisper becomes a tool for control. What started as a simple fight over creative direction exploded into a psychological chess match with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds sitting on one side, perfectly polished and camera-ready, and Wayfair Studios on the other, bruised but unbroken. The public saw smiles, the red carpets, the curated apologies. But behind those perfectly filtered posts was chaos. Every email leaked, every exclusive insider source, every so-called whistleblower. All of it orchestrated. It wasn't coincidence. It was campaign strategy, okay? And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Blake and Ryan weren't defending their reputation. They were manufacturing a new one, rewriting failure as victimhood, and turning public sympathy into a weapon. Think about it. Why fight so hard to seal a recording that supposedly supports your case? Why redact entire sections that would prove your pain? Because those sections didn't prove anything. They proved the opposite. They showed that the meeting wasn't about trauma. It was about tension, not harassment, but control. Steve Sarowitz wasn't some villain out for blood. It was a man cornered by a PR hurricane desperately trying to protect a project he financed. So-called threat was sarcasm, a line ripped from its context and painted with fear to trigger outrage. And outrage sells. Outrage trends. Outrage wins headlines. The system Blake and Ryan played wasn't legal. It was psychological. Every court document became a PR pitch, every filing a press release. Every leaked clip another emotional grenade tossed into the public conversation. It's no longer about winning in court, it's about winning the crowd. And when you control perception, you control everything. Here's the twist that blew the lid off this entire saga. Wayfair's silence was strategy. While Blake's camp screamed harassment, Wayfair stayed quiet. No emotional rebuttals, no media circus, just facts in court. 'Cause they knew time exposes lies faster than outrage sustains them. The evidence trail painted a picture too clear to ignore. Blake's claims lined up not with incidents of harassment, but with moments of professional fallout. Every protected activity she claimed had timing that aligned with PR disasters, not abuse. When the film's marketing imploded, when fans accused her of mocking domestic violence with cocktail names and tone-deaf jokes, the narrative shifted. Overnight from bad PR to bad workplace. Convenient, right? The pattern repeated every time the story went south. Instead of accountability came accusation. Instead of correction came deflection. The goal wasn't justice, it was protection of the image. 'Cause when you live off your image, losing it means losing everything. Ryan Reynolds wasn't just a bystander either. He was the engine behind the curtain. His marketing company orchestrated the campaign that sparked the backlash. His edits shaped the trailers. His strategies set the tone, and when it all collapsed, he became part of the narrative cleanup. That's why his name appears in every version of that statement of accountability. Not because he was part of the lawsuit, but because he was part of the spin. Blake and Ryan needed a story bigger than their failure, one that would reframe public opinion. So they turned to moral outrage, the fastest path to sympathy. And it worked, at least for a while. Social media rallied. Headlines softened. People stopped questioning the marketing fiasco and started echoing a different message. Blake's been wronged. But when the audio surfaced and timelines started matching, the illusion cracked. You can manipulate context, but you can't manipulate timestamps. What's haunting is how far they were willing to go. Blake's filings to the court were laced, with emotional language painting herself as a victim of a corporate machine. All while that same machine, her PR network, was pumping out narratives meant to destroy Wayfair's credibility, the sensitive witness they swore to protect. A decoy for narrative sympathy. The sealed evidence, a stage prop for public outrage. Every move was calibrated. Even the decision to bring this into the public eye during the film's promotion wasn't random, it was tactical. Controversy drives engagement, and engagement drives attention. But the gamble backfired when the details didn't add up. When the timelines mismatched, when the public started asking, wait, what exactly happened? The cracks became impossible to hide. And instead of owning the truth, they doubled down on distortion. Here's the irony that chills you once you realize it. Blake and Ryan built entire careers on authenticity, the relatable couple, the perfect blend of humor and humility. But this case stripped away that mask. It showed that behind the witty tweets and charming smiles are two of Hollywood's most strategic minds, willing to weaponize empathy for control. They wanted the world to see Wayfair as the villain because, in this story, they could only stay heroes if someone else took the fall. Every legal motion, every redacted page, every source close to the matter was another brushstroke in the illusion. But illusions eventually collapse under their own weight. And when the judge finally spoke, the ruling hit like thunder. Generalized fears of bad publicity aren't grounds for secrecy. Translation: the truth can't stay buried just because it's inconvenient. The judge saw through the fog, recognized the manipulation, and called it for what it was: a story spun for sympathy, not a case built on substance. Wayfair's statement: blunt and factual, cut through the noise. The timing of this conversation and the context do not align with harassment. It was never about abuse, it was about image management. And that's the dagger through the heart of the narrative Blake built. Now, standing in the aftermath, what's left isn't a court victory or defeat, it's a revelation, a masterclass in how Hollywood spins reality, how power hides behind vulnerability, and how easily emotion can be weaponized against truth. This isn't just about Blake Lively. It's about every celebrity who turns a spotlight into a shield, every public figure who mistakes sympathy for accountability. And it's about the audiences, us, who believe what we're told because it's packaged to make us feel instead of think. So, the next time you see a glossy Instagram statement about learning and growing, remember this story. Remember that behind every sincere apology could be a strategy. Behind every sealed file could be a secret that contradicts the narrative. This case wasn't an isolated scandal. It was a mirror reflecting how celebrity culture has turned truth into performance art. And when the performance ends, when the applause dies down, all that remains is the truth. Raw, unfiltered, inconvenient. Because that's the real takeaway. This was never a story about harassment. It was about hierarchy. Who controls the narrative, who owns the story, and who decides what the world believes. Wayfair didn't just win a legal argument. It exposed a playbook, the celebrity manual for weaponizing empathy and distorting truth. The final act wasn't a courtroom decision. It was the public waking up. And once the illusion broke, the truth became undeniable. So, besties, remember this. Power without accountability always eats itself. Blake and Ryan's empire might still look polished on the outside, but the cracks are showing. The PR machine